Hello there and welcome to another video with me, Rufus Gazelle, and today we are in Morton in Dorset, where we're going to be paying our respects to the World War I legend and hero Thomas Edward Lawrence, better known to you and me as Lawrence of Arabia. And behind me is St Nicholas Church here in Morton, where Lawrence of Arabia is laid to rest, although not within these grounds of the church itself, but a few hundred yards down the road where the cemetery is located. So as we leave the church behind us, a little bit shady here with the trees, we are going to head down this private drive towards the cemetery itself. But the weather today is acting rather strange. I don't trust it in any way, hence the rain jacket. It's meant to be continuous rain all day, and I was expected to get soaked to the bone, but for some reason it's actually quite nice. There are patches of blue sky and I'm not going to complain, and I'm going to try and make the most of it, but it was a bit of a shock. This was not the weather that was forecast today. I'm sure it might change later, touch wood, even though there is no wood around me except trees, which I'll try and maybe touch in a minute for good luck. But yeah, the weather is truly surprising me today, and I'm so glad of that, because I wasn't actually going to come out today because of the weather being forecast to be so bad, but luckily it's changed in my favour and I did venture out. Now there is a wooden fence post here that I'm going to touch for luck and hope the rain stays away today as I pick up my coffee cup, which I've balanced on that gate there, the main entrance to the church in this private drive. If you ever come to Morton and wish to pay your respects to the final resting place of Lawrence of Arabia, then like I've mentioned already, the actual graveyard itself isn't located within the grounds of St Nicholas Church here in Morton. In fact, it's just down there on the right hand side, and the church entrance here in the centre is down there also on the right hand side through that white private gateway, which is accessible to the general public, but beyond the church it's private land. And the cemetery is right next door to the walled garden here in Morton. Just up here, just coming into view, you can see the entranceway to St Nicholas Cemetery, the Church of St Nicholas. And wow, look at this. Look how grand this looks with the columns and the blue skies above. This day is truly turning out to be very unexpected, not only with the weather, but this grand entranceway, which will lead us to the final resting place of Lawrence of Arabia. Let's take a look inside and locate the headstone. It's not going to take long. I can see straight away just by looking over this white fence, this gate in front of me, that this cemetery isn't very big at all. In fact, it's probably one of the smallest I've ever come across in my life up until now. And as it says on the gate, we will be respectful and shut the gate behind us as we do so. And I've just noticed at the corner of my eye, just down here, a little map which shows you the cemetery, you are here, and the location of the church St Nicholas, which is just there. So shouldn't be too hard to find if anybody comes down here. But yeah, I'm sure this won't take long at all. Colonel Thomas Edward Lawrence was born on the 16th of August 1888 in Tremadog, Carnarvonshire in North Wales. He was a British Army officer, a diplomat, a writer, an archaeologist, even a spy. He became renowned for his role in the Arab Revolt in 1916 to 1918. Lawrence was born out of wedlock. His father was Sir Thomas Chapman, 7th Baronet of Westmeath in Ireland, who had abandoned his wife to live with his daughter's governess. Lawrence's mother, Sarah Juna, with whom he had 5 sons. The family lived under the name Lawrence, and young Thomas attended the City of Oxford High School for Boys. In 1905, at the age of 17, young Lawrence ran away from home to join the army, serving with the Royal Garrison Artillery at St Maure's Castle, Cornwall. When his father eventually found him, his father had him discharged and he returned home. Lawrence then attended the Jesus College in Oxford, graduating with first-class honours in 1910. Fascinated by archaeology since early childhood, in December 1910 he sailed to Beirut, where, intent upon becoming a field archaeologist, he studied the Arabic language and worked at the British Museum's excavations in northern Syria and Iraq. Lawrence would travel throughout the area, living as an Arab, wearing their clothing, speaking their language and learning their culture. He would prove invaluable in the upcoming war. When World War I broke out in 1914, Lawrence joined the army and was soon posted to the Military Intelligence Department in Cairo. In 1916, the Arabs rebelled against the Turkish Ottoman Empire, a German ally, and Lawrence was sent to Mecca on a fact-finding mission. He exceeded his orders. His knowledge of Arabic language and culture enabled him to work directly with the Arab leaders, whom he convinced to work together in their revolt to aid British interests. He tied up Turkish troops by having them guard long stretches of railroad tracks against Arab attacks. In 1917, he arranged for the Arabs to capture the city of Aqaba. Promoted to major, Lawrence then organised the Arab attack on Damascus, and in 1918 was promoted to lieutenant colonel. A close friend of Prince Faisal, Lawrence gained great respect from the Arab population for his willingness to adapt to their customs. Lawrence loved the Arabs. No one knows for sure how much he knew about Britain's broken promises. They had already agreed with France to carve up all the Arab nations after the war, giving them no liberation, even though they fought so hard. France already saw Syria as French territory since the Crusades. Lawrence did know something. He said in his book, The 7 Pillars of Wisdom, "I had to join the conspiracy and assure the men of their reward. It's better to win and break your word than to lose." For his war efforts, Lawrence was made a commander in the Order of the Bath and awarded the Distinguished Service Order and French Legion of Honour, although he did refuse the Order of the Knight Commander. After the war, Lawrence worked at the Paris Peace Conference, where he promoted the cause of Arab independence, but despite his efforts, Palestine and Iraq were mandated to Britain. In 1921, the press discovered his exploits, and he was soon the subject of media frenzy. When British attempts to govern Iraq resulted in an Arab revolt, Winston Churchill and Lawrence went there, and by 1922 the two men had achieved a settlement. Lawrence returned home to great acclaim in the press. Seeking quiet, he joined the RAF under an assumed name, Ross, to avoid the hounding media. When the press discovered his name change, he was forced out of the RAF. He enlisted into the Royal Tank Corps under a name of Thomas Shaw, but unhappy with tanks, he was able to transfer back to the RAF in 1925. When his book, Revolt in the Desert, abridged version of the 7 Pillars of Wisdom, was published the next year, the resulting public interest was so intense that he was transferred to a remote base in British India, where he remained until 1928. He remained on military service until 1935. After retiring in March of 1935, he moved to Dorset, England, where 2 months later he was thrown from his motorcycle, suffering severe head injuries, and died 6 days later without regaining consciousness. Having never married, his younger brother, A.W. Lawrence, inherited his estate. He was buried here in Morton Cemetery in Dorset, in the Frampton family plot. The Framptons were cousins and close friends to Lawrence. His role in the Oscar-winning movie Lawrence of Arabia from 1962 was played by actor Peter O'Toole. It also starred Alec Guinness. So as you walk down this centre path here in the cemetery, the very small cemetery, right at the back you'll come across the wooden cross, a large wooden cross with a bench, and to the right hand side is the location, the final resting place of Lawrence of Arabia. So let's take a closer look at this headstone, this magnificent headstone that stands right before us, standing proud in honour of this great man, this hero who was duped by the British. And the headstone reads, "To the dear memory of Thomas Edward Lawrence, Fellow of All Souls College, Oxford, born 16th of August 1888, died 19th of May 1935. The hour is coming, and now is when the dead shall hear the voice of the Son of God, and they that hear shall live." What great respect has been given to this man with this absolutely magnificent grave A man that stood for so much and was betrayed by the British and the French. Such disrespect to this man's integrity. So I'm sat here just on the bench, just beside the grave of Lawrence of Arabia, with the sun beaming down on me, and I'm just reflecting on what this man stood for. Now, a lot of people may disagree that he was a great man, probably from a political view, politics, that sort of thing, but as a leader he truly was inspiring. He wanted the liberation of the Arab nations. He wanted fairness. They were his friends, and the fact that he was let down disrespectively by the British and French was an understatement. A man who could lead the Arabs in capturing Aqaba, the Arabs only losing 2 men, albeit with the help of the British Navy. He went on and succeeded in catching Aqaba, even though he nearly lost his own life when he shot his own camel. The road to Damascus was then opened, and the Arab forces went on and liberated the area from the Turkish Ottoman Empire. For then the British and the French to turn around and say, no, you aren't free. We're going to carve it up and use the areas for our own gain. How must Lawrence have felt? The betrayal that he felt towards his fellow Arab friends. The bonds and the friendships that he had established over the many years with the Arabs, to then feel like he's let them down in some way, right at their finest hour. The betrayal. Their liberation was a farce. They had fought a war with the hope that freedom would be at the end of it, to then replace the Turkish Ottoman Empire with British and French rule, carving up the area and giving them nothing in return. All that effort, all that fight, all that struggle, for absolutely nothing. What must have gone through his head? I know I would feel like I would have let all my fellow friends, all my fellow Arabs down. Betrayal isn't the word. I just don't know what is. On our way back from Morton, heading towards Bovington, where Lawrence of Arabia had his fatal crash back in 1935, I just wanted to stop off here at Clouds Hill and show you his retreat, where he spent most of his years after the war. So this is the home of Lawrence of Arabia. Like I said already, this is where he spent his remaining years after the war, and also where parts of his famous book, The 7 Pillars of Wisdom, were written, here at Clouds Hill. So I've been kindly let in to have a little closer look at the cottage from the outside, where Lawrence of Arabia once lived. And like I said, he took solace in speed and his motorbikes, and this is where he spent the remainder of his life, here at this cottage. He didn't like to be in the public eye. He didn't like the fame which came not only from his time and his adventures during the war, but also from the book that he had written, The 7 Pillars of Wisdom. And just down the road is where he had the fatal crash back in 1935, where we're going to be going next. And this is where I believe he was coming back to his home here at Clouds Hill when he had that crash, and what he must have been going through in those years after the war. The mental anguish that he must have had being let down by the British government is literally unfounded. It really is. But there it is, the cottage here at Clouds Hill, Lawrence of Arabia's home. So just behind me, just down the road from Clouds Hill, is a memorial to Lawrence of Arabia. Near this spot is where he had that fatal motorcycle crash. So let's just go and have a closer look at this memorial and see what it says. As we take a closer look at this memorial, the writing isn't overly clear, so I'm going to try my best, but it reads, near this spot, Lawrence of Arabia crashed on his motorcycle and was fatally injured on the 13th of May 1935. And at the bottom, a little plaque which reads, this tree was planted on the 13th of May 1983 by Mr. Tom Beaumont, who served with Lawrence in Arabia as his #1 Vickers machine gunner. Wow. So near this spot is where he had the fatal crash. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe through these trees near the memorial is the actual location where he crashed, and there is another memorial through those trees. So I'm just going to take a little look through there and see what we can find. Okay, so I'm just going to take a little walk through here and just see what we come across, but I do believe there is another stone memorial in amongst these trees. It is in here somewhere, and I can only imagine what it must have been like, or how far he must have been thrown from his motorcycle to land this far off the road. Okay, so I'm just heading in this direction a little bit further in, about 2 minutes from where I left the car, and we still haven't come across anything just yet. Nothing standing out, that is obvious, but hopefully we will come across something soon. Down here the traffic is just up there, up that embankment, but I believe down here is where he was thrown. And yes, through these trees I see a stone memorial. Here we have it. Wow. And he was thrown down from the road up there, down this embankment in this area here. And here we have this memorial to Thomas Edward Lawrence. Was fatally injured near this place, 13th of May 1935. Wow. This is remarkable. Thrown from all the way up there to somewhere down here is where he, I guess, passed away fatally. So let's just have a little wander up this embankment and just see. Yes, because there's the road. Oh, without falling down the hill. So he literally was coming from that direction, which is where Bovington Army Camp is located. The Tank Museum is also down there. And around here we have a lot of military training areas where they practice the tank training, etc. And he was, like I said, coming from that direction. I believe, heading towards Clouds Hill, which is just up there, which is where his home is. And apparently the story goes, he was riding along and there was a dip in the road, and his vision was obscured and he didn't see two boys on their bicycles. And as he swerved to avoid them, he was thrown over the handlebars, and I'm assuming down into this gully below, which is where the memorial is. I just can't comprehend. I just can't get my head around it, if I'm honest. So I've just been speaking to this gentleman who's walking his dog literally just behind me there, and he lives locally in this area, and he just sort of pinpointed a few facts out to me. This memorial that I see below me here basically states that he died or was fatally injured near this place. So I'm there assuming that he was flung off his bike down this ditch and possibly hitting some of these trees. But what you have to take into consideration is that the tree that was planted down in the lay-by back there by Tom Beaumont back in 1983 are actually not much bigger than these trees that we see around us now. So back in 1935, these trees that you see literally here wouldn't have been this big, or they might have been saplings, or who knows. Also, he said that this road has been built up over time, and it possibly, this bank here wasn't as high as what it is now. And there could have also been a thick hedge that ran along this road, which has obviously been cut back over the years. So it does make sense that where it says he was fatally injured near this place doesn't mean it was down here. It could have been on the roadside up there around this area. We also have to take into consideration as well that a lot of the terrain around here would have changed a hell of a lot since it would have been back in 1935. The training area that you see behind me is a lot more modernised and planned out, whereas back then there would have been a lot more shrubbery, a lot more heathland that currently isn't there anymore. It was also mentioned that when he came across the two young boys on their bikes, he actually clipped one of the bikes, supposedly clipped one of the young boys' bikes, which then obviously led to him getting flung over the handlebars and getting fatally injured. So we have to also take that into consideration as well. So just because this memorial is located down here doesn't necessarily mean he was flung into this ravine and fatally injured. And also I have to add as well, when I went up to Clouds Hill, I mentioned about this is where he resided after the war, the years after the war. In fact, it wasn't years after the war. He actually passed away only 2 months after he came out of military service. 2 months. So he didn't even get to enjoy retirement. What a shame. What a crying shame. The gentleman that I was speaking to also pointed out that Lawrence was a very competent motorcycle rider. He could get to London from here in Clouds Hill in about an hour and a half. So you have to imagine back then what the roads would have been like, unlike today, which are smooth. Then they would have been very bumpy, a lot of potholes. The roads wouldn't have been as straight. You would have been going on small, bendy roads instead of the roads that you see nowadays, like the M3 and the M25. So to be able to ride his motorbike all the way to London from Clouds Hill in about an hour and a half just shows you how much of a professional motorcycle rider he was. And also, during the fatal crash, he wasn't wearing a helmet or leathers. So you can imagine, only imagine, how horrific his injuries would have been. So I've just returned back to the memorial, and really I should have been more aware of what really was around back in 1935. You've only got to take a look at this tree in front of me, which was planted back in 1983, and how large and mature it has grown over that time. Now, back in 1935, the trees would be a lot bigger than this, or removed or collapsed due to bad weather or storms. And a lot of the trees through there are no different really to this one. So a lot of that foliage wouldn't have been around back in 1935, or it certainly would have been a lot different. I mean, you've only got to take a look at this modern training area in front of me now, which obviously has changed a lot over the years, especially since 1935. So you can see what I mean about not being actually able to locate the exact spot the fatal crash happened. And out of respect, I don't really want to know. All I do know is that there's a couple of nice tributes, memorials here, that pay respects to the late great Lawrence of Arabia. And you can see here at this viewing point on this road towards Bovington and Clouds Hill, you have these maps, these diagrams that show you what sort of military vehicles come and go. A nice place to bring your children, I guess, to see these vehicles doing their manoeuvres. And you've got these big training ramps and mounds that they go up in front of us. Must be quite interesting to see. And here, another little notice board that gives you a bit more detail about Lawrence. And there's a nice little trail that you can follow in front of me, and a little bit more information about the accident just up there. This is quite interesting, just here. Returning from the post office, Lawrence was travelling fast when he came upon two young cyclists in a dip in the road. Swerving to avoid them, he clipped one of the bicycles and was thrown from his motorcycle, sustaining serious head injuries. The road in the area has since been improved over the years. Well, that's just obvious. That's what we said a minute ago. A lot has changed since 1935, especially the trees and the road possibly being built up a lot more. It then goes on to say he was taken unconscious to the military hospital at Bovington, where he died at 8 AM on Sunday the 19th of May 1935. The inquest was held on the following Tuesday the 21st at the hospital. It was conducted by the East Dorset coroner Ralph Neville Jones. Witnesses included the two cyclists, Frank Fletcher and Albert Hargreaves, a Corporal Catchpole of the Royal Army Corps and Captain Allen of the Royal Army Medical Corps. PC Loader attended from Morton police station, and Lawrence's brother Arnold came from Cambridge to identify the body and explain that Lawrence had changed his name by deed poll. The inquest decided that Thomas Edward Shaw, which I'm assuming is Lawrence of Arabia as he changed his name by deed poll, was described as a retired aircraftsman whilst riding a motorcycle between Bovington Camp and Clouds Hill, Turner's Puddle at 11:30 AM on the 13th of May 1935, collided with a pedal cyclist. He was thrown from his machine and sustained serious injuries and died at the military hospital on the 19th of May 1935 without recovering consciousness, and that the cause of death was congestion of the lungs and heart failure following a fracture of the skull. I'm not going to go into any more detail, but that just gives a brief, more insight into the actual accident itself and what actually happened, and that has cleared up quite a bit. So whenever a celebrity dies, there's always this mystery surrounding their death, like things happen untoward and there was another element to the crash, something that can't be explained. And in Lawrence's case, it was no different. Corporal Catchpole, I believe, in the inquest stated that there could have been a black car, involved in the accident, going roughly about 60 miles an hour. We don't know for sure if there was a car involved. Apparently the two young boys that were involved in the incident said there were no cars. But other people say differently. And if there was a black car, what was he doing? And did he cause the crash? Who knows? So I just want to summarise, we're getting towards the end of the video now. There is literally so much information that I've had to process today, all the places I've visited, and it truly has been an amazing day, but nonetheless, a lot to take in. There have been certain elements to this video where I've had to do a bit of narration, just simply because there is too much information to memorise, well, for my poor little brain anyway, and I do apologise for anybody that doesn't like narration in a video, but sometimes you have to do what you have to do to get the correct information across without making any errors or mistakes, especially when you're doing a video about a man's life or a woman's life. You have to make sure that it is correct and you don't give out any false information. Now, like I said at the beginning of this video, if there is anything that I might have missed, any facts about his life that I might have not included in this video, then please feel free to leave your opinions in the comments box below. I've tried my best and hopefully I've done it justice, but you can only do what you can do. You can only try your best at things, and I wanted to make sure that I got this not only as informative as I can, but also interesting, and to make it interesting without chucking too many facts at you and boring the pants off you. And that's hard, quite hard to do. So thank you very much for watching, guys. It's been a pleasure, and I hope to see you in the next video. From me, Rufus Gazelle, here just outside Bovington. Thank you so much. And all I've got left to say is vlog over.
They won't be coming for money, not the best of them. They'll be coming for Damascus, which I'm going to give them.
That's all I want.
All you want is someone holding down the Turkish right. But I'm going to give them Damascus. We'll get there before you do. And when we've got it, we'll keep it. You can tell the politicians to burn their bit of paper now.
Fair enough.
Fair? What's fair got to do with it? It's going to happen. I shall want quite a lot of money.
All there is.
Not that much. The best of them won't come for money. They'll come for me.